We're on the Liberty University campus. I'm talking with Ryan Helfenbein. We're talking about the students here. We're talking about the church, the role the church has in politics, and we're also talking about culturally what's happening. And Ryan, we were talking about marriage as an example of how we've entered the negative world. I remember that decision that came down that said that marriage between two men or two women was equally valid in the eyes of the law, and actually forced it upon, even against the Defense of the Marriage Act and all of the efforts. That decision, one of the justices wrote a dissent and said, now this is not a license to attack Christians for their faith. Yeah. But it's kind of become that, hasn't it?
That's almost like a sentiment, and I appreciate the sentiment, but at the end of the day, these are two entirely different worldviews and ideologies, and one will dominate the other. In the end, there can only be one victor. And so that's the problem right now that you're seeing in the culture war. Antony Blinken basically, as Secretary of State, declared war on religious liberty when he made sexual orientation, gender identity the #1 policy agenda for the administration. And this is, again, foreign policy. It's stated in all of their documents when they first took office in 2020.
Well, and this is scary to other nations that have been traditionally our allies, and Putin is taking advantage of this.
Right.
He's telling other nations, hey, by the way, if you don't accept their view of sexuality and gender and so forth, they'll cut you off, or they'll weaponize against you using the dollar or the SWIFT transaction system or something. That's been a big push to this BRICS movement. Yeah. A lot of those BRICS nations have a more traditional view of sexuality.
They do.
And they're entering BRICS. And so we're essentially turning allies into enemies.
That's right. And then when you try to weaponize money to punish, now I'm no fan of Putin, he's a thug, but there's a way to be critical of both, right? Bad behavior, deserves our criticism. So you're right. I mean, when all of a sudden Putin is then pointing to areas where we have misconduct, right? It makes his job easy. So yeah, it is a priority and policy agenda of this administration to push sexual orientation, gender identity over religious liberty.
And that's SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity.
That's right. Yeah. And those new standards, by the way, they're coming after Christian schools. They're coming after accreditation, right? They want to write these standards. So far, religious liberty is still hanging on, but barely.
With some interesting allies, too, because you see people that don't believe in the Bible at all whatsoever, but believe that there's such a thing as a woman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're touching on something that I love this, very perceptive. The trans movement has actually been one of the biggest blessings to Christianity, and here's why. Polling now is actually down across the board with LGBT because of the T. The T is pulling this movement down. Polling for gay marriage as a whole is down because of the trans movement. People are seeing that ideology being forced upon young children, and they're saying, absolutely not, I never signed up for this, and by the way, I don't agree with some other things that I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's because of the trans movement.
Europe is rejecting.
Yeah.
And yet the hardest thing in the world for me to see is someone say, I believe in the science, and they trot out, I'm scientific and you're not. And then they'll say there's no such thing as a woman.
Right.
Which biology has been a part of science as long as I've been alive, and I assume based on the history books for quite some time.
Yes.
And there always was a definition of what a man was and a woman was, but now it's a dividing thing. And to that degree, the left is attacking themselves.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And by the way, in healthcare, I'll just say this. So I'm a dad. And, I've got 3 kids. My wife right now is with child, so we're really excited about that.
Congratulations.
And so we're in the room and we're looking at a heartbeat. We're just looking at a heartbeat, beats per minute, the rhythm of that heart. From the rhythm of that heart, they can tell male or female. That's
wow.
Science. Science does that. And so this gender ideology would overturn that and say, no. In fact, they want to, for adults, and this is a big crisis in healthcare, not to report whether you're male or female. Imagine going into cardiac arrest, and EMT doesn't know and can't treat you. It could be the difference between life and death.